Welcome to another live stream. It is Wednesday, May 7th, 2025 at 12:30 p.m. Pacific time. I need to, okay, I was hearing myself in my headphones, needed to turn off my YouTube volume. I have a link in the chat for anyone who wants to call the show. And I also have a phone number in the chat. So this is, I'm Dan Norton. I'm a Ayn Rand fan and a philosophy PhD. And I have an open phone line for anyone who wants to call in and chat. We are very broad here in terms of the topics that I'm open to talking about. And you're free to guide the discussion in terms of the topics we cover. I always have veto power, but you can certainly raise any topics you're interested in talking about, and I will be happy to engage. Also, we can engage in the chat, but there's also a phone line there for people who want to call in. I put in the title today, Egoism or Altruism, which is better? So that's just a hook, one possible topic we could discuss, but we don't have to restrict ourselves to that. And we usually don't. We usually cover an array of topics. It could be something in current events. We've talked about Israel before on the show. We've talked about January 6th. Those are some recent topics. And whatever the topic is, I try to bring to the conversation what I've learned from Ayn Rand and her philosophy of objectivism, because I think it's a great philosophy and it really helps to make sense of the world and is helpful for one's own life, achieving happiness. So that's the basic framework I bring to the conversation. And anyone is welcome to call in or chat, so whatever your level of knowledge is. You don't have to know anything at all about Ayn Rand's philosophy. You can be completely new to it. I've got people who've never heard of Ayn Rand before, or at least never read Ayn Rand, who come across my channel and sometimes even call in. And people who have read Ayn Rand for years. So whatever your level of knowledge is, you're welcome to participate. Just a quick thumbnail sketch of Ayn Rand's philosophy. For anyone who's new, she's in favor of reason, egoism, and capitalism. And I could talk about all of those for a long time, but just to keep it very brief, that is in a nutshell what she stands for. So feel free to ask about any of those, or maybe if there's something you have a question or objection to, it's all fair game. So there's a Zoom link in the chat. If you want to call in by phone, there's a number which I will read out for anyone who's only listening. The number is 669-444-9171. And you might have to put a country code in there, a 1 for the United States if you're calling from another country. We've had some people from Europe calling in, Bulgaria, and some other people from Europe have been on the chat. Last time we had a caller, I think he was from the United States, I would guess, but he did use the phone line. That was good to see that it actually worked. I've tested it myself once, but it's good to have someone else call in as well. So he used the phone number that I just gave instead of the Zoom link, the web link. So if for whatever reason you don't want to use the web link. Maybe you don't have, I don't think you need the Zoom client to call in. Um, if you click on this web link, I don't think you have to have Zoom installed. But anyways, if for some reason that link doesn't work, you can call the phone number 669-444-9171. And then there will be a meeting ID for this specific Zoom call that I have today that you'll have to enter after that phone number. So the meeting ID is 847-742-01857 #. Again, that's 847-742-01857 #. And then I think you'll be prompted to enter the pound sign a second time. And then once you do that, you will be in the waiting room on Zoom, and I can let you in. All right. I see we got our first call or first chat of the day from ONOS, who called in on a previous show. I can't remember what it was we were talking about. Oh, was it? Okay, I think it's okay. I remember now. I think you were the one who was asking about open and closed objectivism, and then we went on to discuss some other topics like life qua man. I'm remembering the title now of that show when I think you called in. So that was maybe two or three shows ago. But yeah, I definitely remember the open versus closed objectivism issue. And you say here in the chat, keeping with the altruism versus egoism topic, what do you think about David Kelly's Benevolence? Okay. So David Kelly, for anyone who doesn't know, he is a philosopher who has become associated with what's called open objectivism, which I don't think is a good name for it because, as I explained when we discussed this issue of open versus closed objectivism, I think objectivism is the name of Ayn Rand's philosophy, the set of ideas that she came up with. So if you come up with some other set of ideas, if you want to add another virtue like benevolence or toleration, well, I don't think you can claim that's part of objectivism. You can call it something else, but I don't think objectivism is the right name for it. It creates confusion. It's unclear what objectivism refers to. If one time some people who use it refers to Ayn Rand's philosophy, other people they use it to refer to Ayn Rand's philosophy plus whatever David Kelly added onto it, and maybe someone else. There could be a million different versions of it. So partly for clarity reasons, I think it's important to just use the term objectivism for one thing. And Ayn Rand was the first to use that with a capital O, at least, for her philosophy. So I think that's what it should refer to. And but anyways, without going into all of that again, let me just address more specifically, if I have anything to say about this question. What do I think of David Kelly's Benevolence? I actually don't know what he says about benevolence. That's I've read some of his writings, but I don't think I've read I don't remember reading any work specifically about benevolence. I mean, I remember hearing, I think, that might be one of the virtues that he thinks should be elevated to a virtue on a par with the other virtues that Ayn Rand lists. So she lists 7 virtues, rationality being the primary virtue, and then six other virtues, which are aspects of rationality. And those other 6 are independence, integrity, honesty, justice, productiveness, and pride. And I get the impression that David Kelly thinks maybe benevolence should be added to that list, as well as toleration. I'm not sure, but maybe. But anyways, I don't know how he argues for that, if he does argue for that, because I haven't read his book. I think he has a book called Unrugged Individualism. Maybe that's the one where he talks most about benevolence, but I haven't read that one. I read Truth and Toleration, which I think that was published around 1990 and later was retitled. I don't know if it was also revised at all, but there was later a book called The Contested Legacy of Ayn Rand's, which I think was basically Truth and Toleration, but maybe there were some changes he made in that. And then I think maybe even later, the title was changed back to Truth and Toleration. I forget exactly the details, but the one I remember reading was Truth and Toleration, the 1990 version of it, I think, if there is more than one version, which was published, I guess, a year after his split with the Ayn Rand Institutes. So the Ayn Rand Institute holds the view that objectivism is the name of Ayn Rand's philosophy, not anything else, like something that some modification someone else might want to make to it. Um, so there was a split between David Kelly and the Ayn Rand Institute. And I don't, there might have been other issues too, besides just this open versus closed issue. Um, but I think that was part of it. And Leonard Peikoff, who was Ayn Rand's student for decades, he wrote an article called Fact and Value, which was published in 1989. And that goes into uh, some of the details on exactly uh, how Leonard Peikoff thinks that David Kelly is getting objectivism wrong. And then I think Truth and Toleration, which Kelly published the next year, 1990, was a response to Fact and Value, at least in part a response. I don't know if he did other, I don't recall if he did other things in that work. Um, and I don't recall Leonard Peikoff coming back with a counter response. At least in writing, I think Fact and Value was his final statements on the issue, at least the final statement I'm aware of. But there might have been other intellectuals or philosophers in the movement who wrote counter responses. And, maybe it went back and forth, and I get maybe some people are still debating it to this day. There probably are some, um, but in any case, that's a little about the history of the split, and then um, between the Ayn Rand Institute and David Kelly, who used to be affiliated with the Ayn Rand Institute, but then he went off and started his own organization. Okay, Onoes came back with another comment in the chat. He says, tolerating and benevolence seem very much like synonyms to me. Is that wrong? I, my hunch is yes, that is wrong. Tolerating or toleration is putting up with something, whereas benevolence, I wouldn't define that as putting up with something. It's more like having a positive outlook on the world or on yourself or both. But I think, yeah, benevolence is suggesting a some kind of positive or optimistic outlook on things, whereas tolerating isn't quite that. It's an attitude you have towards something that you disagree with, or somehow are antagonistic to, but instead of accepting it, or instead of shunning it, you accept it, at least in some sense. I guess there could be different senses in which you accept something or tolerate something. But they are different concepts, so I would not call those synonyms. Um, I think you can be benevolent and also not tolerate certain things. And actually, I think you need to not tolerate certain things. Like if you tolerate everything, if you tolerate your enemies, people who are rude to you, people who physically assault you, then I think that's going to undermine your benevolence. It's going to make your life worse, maybe make your life miserable. So if you are tolerating the wrong kind of things or sanctioning the wrong kinds of things, that term sanction is used a lot in objectivism, then I think that can actually undermine a positive, benevolent sort of outlook on the world. And then Oh Noah says, I see. I assumed benevolence meant benevolence to others. It can involve others, but I don't think it has to. You can have a benevolent attitude towards the world just at large. Like you can feel that the world is open to achievement. It's hospitable to the achievement of your values. It's not the case that you're doomed to frustration and defeat and misery and failure. That would be a malevolent universe sort of view. Ayn Rand uses that phrase, malevolent universe, in contrast to benevolent universe. Um, but others can certainly figure into it. Um, but I think it's a broader sort of idea. So you can have a benevolent universe outlook, which means your attitude towards the world in general, including other people, but not exclusively other people. Your attitude towards them. Like if you think people are always out to get you, um, no one can truly be your friend. They've always got some secret, hidden, sinister motive, and they're trying to exploit you, and they don't really care about you. They're going to try to pull something over on you, stab you in the back at the first opportunity. That would be a malevolent attitude towards other people. Um, and maybe some people are like that, um, but if you think everyone is like that, and then I think that's a malevolence, or what's the other word? Anthropo, not anthropocentric, but like the negative. I'm forgetting, or misanthropic view of other people. Um, and the opposite could be like a Pollyannish view, where you think everyone is nice and kind and virtuous and honest and rational, and you don't think anyone is really bad. Everyone is has a good motivation. Um, that would be the opposite view, which I think is also an error, right? It's not like everyone is bad and evil or everyone is good and rational. Um, I think it varies from person to person, and people just need to be judged as individuals. Um, John Wine, hi. You say Rand listed seven major virtues. I think benevolence is a minor virtue if there ever was one. Okay. There are other virtues like courage, which I don't know if she discusses at all, but I think that virtue has been discussed in secondary literature of objectivism, at least, or maybe in talks, lectures that have been given. I think there was at least one where someone was discussing courage um, as a what maybe what you're calling a minor virtue or a lesser virtue. Um, so yeah, there are others that, and I don't know that Rand viewed her list as exhaustive, even of the major virtues, um, but it at least put a lot of meat on the bones of just if all she said was rationality, which is the primary virtue in her system, I think that could still leave a lot of uh, room for filling in. Well, what exactly does that mean more concretely? So I think it's good to have some lists. Does it necessarily have to be six subsidiary virtues? Could it be seven or eight? I don't know that she ever said anything about that, but I think it is helpful to have some more specificity to the basic virtue of rationality. And then John says, or maybe benevolence is just a form of honesty slash recognition and respect for rationality, productivity, independence. I guess it's a an aspect of rationality. I guess any virtue would have to be that. If I don't know if you could have a virtue that's not an aspect of rationality, because rationality is having your mind in contact with the world. It's a very kind of broad perspective on your relationship to existence. And um, if virtue is doing the right thing, well, that's somehow got to involve keeping your mind in contact with the world. So I'm not sure there could be a virtue independent of rationality. So maybe any virtue, including any lesser virtue that Ayn Rand did not mention, would be a aspect of rationality. But then, could you further specify it and say it's an aspect of honesty or productivity or independence, as John is mentioning here? Um, I'm not sure. Haven't thought about that. Oh knows. Oh, he says, by the way, my name is just Oh knows. I had to add the extra S. Okay. Sometimes people have to, well, like in my with my username on YouTube, it's Dan Norton 1, my channel, because Dan Norton was already taken. So I just added some ones. So I guess you had to do that with Oh knows. You had to add some S's at the end to make it a unique screen name on YouTube. Okay, so I'll just call you Oh knows. And I see you spell it with a K when you're typing it out here, as opposed to the part of the face. I was imagining the nose referred to the thing on your face, but maybe you're referring to nose as in knowledge. Maybe your name is O and you know things, you have knowledge of things, and so you called yourself O knows. I don't know. I wonder about people's screen names sometimes. I'm interested to know how people come up with their screen names. So if you want to share, I'd be interested. John Wayne, actually, I wonder about your screen name too. The I think of John Wayne, the actor, when I see your name, but I don't know if you took your screen name from John Wayne, the actor, or if that's just your name. But if you want to share anything about that, I'd be interested to know. Feel. Up to you. Okay. And then there's a, a chat from Oh No's, which says, I don't see how you could even attach the adjective benevolence to the universe. Doesn't something being benevolent require free will? Okay. The adjective would be benevolent with a T. Benevolence is actually a noun. So Ayn Rand referred to the benevolent universe premise. And how could the universe be benevolent? She meant it was benevolent in the sense that it's open to achievement. It's not a you're not doomed to failure. So you might think if you have the malevolent universe that you are doomed and there's no way to achieve happiness in life. Benevolence, having a benevolent universe premise doesn't mean you think you necessarily will achieve success and happiness. Uh, you won't. It depends on how your life goes and depends on the kinds of choices you make. It also depends on some things that are not in your control. Like if you're born in a certain place, that might make it much easier or much harder to achieve happiness. If you're born in a society that respects freedom, it's going to be easier to achieve happiness than if you're born into an oppressive dictatorship that tramples on your rights. Or if you were born with some disease, that can make it harder to achieve happiness than if you're born healthy without any disease. Um, so not everything is up to your choice, but some things are up to your choice. It is up to your choice whether you choose to engage your minds or just passively drift through life. You need to use your minds to create values, to understand the world, and that's up to you. And if you do that, then it's at least possible to achieve happiness, given that certain things that are not within your control are also conducive. So, the idea of the benevolent universe doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to be happy or have a good life, but that it's at least possible in this world. And even if you are born into like Soviet Russia, where your rights are trampled upon, um, you could still have a benevolent universe premise and recognize that at least somewhere in the world, if only I could escape to it, I could achieve happiness. It's not the case that the universe by nature necessarily is inhospitable to human achievements and happiness and well-being. It's still possible, at least somewhere, for some people to achieve happiness. So I guess that can give you some consolation, even if you're caught in a unfortunate circumstance. You could think, well, maybe I could at least try to get somewhere better, and it could be worth my while because I know that the universe by nature isn't. It doesn't make happiness impossible. I just have to get to the right set of set of conditions. I need to get to the right place. Um, so, but you wouldn't even try. You would just give up if you had a malevolent universe premise and you thought it wasn't possible, no matter what you did. Okay, so hopefully that answers some of Oh No's comment. And then John Wayne says, my username isn't actually based on the actor. Okay. Fully, I use Is That You, John Wayne, which is a reference to Full Metal Jacket. Okay. I guess that's a movie, which I haven't seen it, but I think I've heard of that. So there's a character in Metal Jacket named John Wayne, and your name is based off of that line in the movie or that character in that movie. Okay. So maybe there is a actor John Wayne, but it's not it's the actual name of a fictional character as opposed to the real name or the actual name of a actor. That's a little confusing. But anyways, I think I got what you mean. Thanks for explaining that, John. All right. So we got a few people here watching and a couple people in the chat. So if anyone else wants to say hi, feel free. I always like to see who's watching if you are comfortable participating in the chat. Some people like to be anonymous, and that's fine. But if you don't mind, so I would be interested to see who's here. You can just drop a hello in the chat. And also, if you like to stream, I'd appreciate it if you'd give it a like. Hit that thumbs up button, because that'll help the stream and the algorithm, help my channel grow. Any subscriptions, I appreciate those. I got a few subscriptions this week. Yesterday was pretty good. I think I got 2 yesterday, which is uncommon for my channel, at my size at least. For me, it's a good day if I get 1 new subscriber each day. But yesterday I got 2. I'm not sure why, but that was good to see. So I definitely appreciate any subscriptions. Want to get up to 1,000 subscribers. That'll be a great milestone to hit, because then I can apply to YouTube to monetize my channel. And then I can start taking super chats. That'll be a big step towards making this a self-sustaining project. Right now, I'm just doing some other things for work. So I'm subsidizing this channel by doing other work, which gives me the money to pay the bills. And then I have some time to do the YouTube channel. But if I can make the channel financially self-sustaining, then I can spend more time on it. All right, we got some more people in the chat. Hunter, welcome. I recognize your name from the Euron Brooks show. I think I've heard him mention a Hunter from time to time. I don't know if you're the same Hunter. I would guess you are. But anyways, welcome to the channel. You ask, have I ever been to OCON? That is the Objectivist Conference. Yes, I have. Many times. I actually first started going to Objectivist conferences before they were even called OCON. The first conference I ever went to was in 2000 in Richmond. And back then it was run by an organization called Second Renaissance Conferences. I think that's a reference to a line in Atlas Shrugged. You could think of what the objectivist movement is as a second renaissance, trying to bring about a reinvigoration of culture, kind of like the Renaissance that followed the medieval era. It was kind of a rebirth of the ancient Greek spirit. Well, we need a further rebirth to take that spirit of the ancient Greeks, that this worldly, human, secular, individualistic sort of attitude, and make it even more consistent using Ayn Rand's philosophy, and so bring about a second Renaissance. And so this Objectivist Conference organization was called Second Renaissance Conferences. So I went to the Second Renaissance Conference in 2000s, and eventually in 2003, I think that was the year when the Ayn Rand Institute purchased the Second Renaissance Conference business. And also there was a bookstore called Second Renaissance Books. And I used to order tapes out of there. So Leonard Peikoff gave these courses on objectivism and applications of objectivism to various fields like education or the art of thinking. The history of philosophy was one of his courses. He gave many courses, excellent courses, amazing courses, which now are online for free. So you all who are coming to objectivism more recently are fortunate in that you have all this amazing material which is available for free on YouTube, or I think you can watch a lot of it on the Ayn Rand Institute's website. There's a campus section of it, Ayn Rand Institute campus, where I think you can find a lot of Leonard Peikoff's courses, as well as courses by other intellectuals. But back when I was first getting into objectivism in the late 90s, I had to purchase these courses on cassette tape, and they were expensive. At least they were for me. So I would pay hundreds of dollars for some of these courses. My dad would help me out with some of it, and I definitely appreciated that. I don't think I paid for all of them on my own. I don't remember what proportion. Um, yeah, I don't remember. It's so long ago. But anyways, I paid a lot of money for those, but it was worth it. It was definitely worth it. Um, but uh, so, anyways, I was saying that the Ayn Rand Institute eventually purchased Second Renaissance books, which didn't sell just books, as I'm saying. They also sold these lecture courses on tape by Leonard Peikoff and many others. And ARI purchased that business, both the conference business and the book service business, I think in 2003. And then from that point on, they called the conferences OCON, Objectivist Conferences. And I've been to many of those. Haven't gone to every year. They usually happen well, I guess there's always a summer conference, but sometimes they have conferences at different times of the year. And usually I don't go to those. I usually just go to the summer conference. And I haven't missed one for many years. I think for maybe 10 years. I, if for sometime I used to go to the ones on the West Coast. They would alternate between East Coast and West Coast. And whenever it came to the West Coast, I would go to those because I'm on the West Coast in California. But for the last 10 years, I would go to it, I think, no matter where it has been. And sometimes they've no longer just done it on the coast. Like there was one in Texas, in Austin, a few years ago. Um, but typically they're on the East Coast or the West Coast, and I usually go to those. Um, and Hunter says, was Hunter the next chat? I think it was Hunter. Oh, Dennis Mijatovic says hello. Welcome, Dennis. Hi. I wonder if there was a Dennis on Facebook I was just interacting with. I don't know if you're the same Dennis, but just earlier today I got a comment from a Dennis. Um, but anyways, hi to you. And Hunter says, that's right. Meaning, forgot that was what that was in reference to. Oh, that I think that was that he's the same Hunter who's sometimes on the Euron Brooks show. Okay. And then Hunter says, so your name, yeah, that's also. So I want to know now, like, what's the story behind your name? Why do you have two Hunters? Maybe I'll just call you Hunter to keep it simple, but the full name here is Hunter Hunter. And I'm curious what the story is behind that name, if you want to share. So Hunter says, they're great lately. I've heard they used to not be as good. I guess okay. You're talking about the conferences. Uh, he says, I went to Miami, Anaheim, and definitely going to Boston this year. It's like a breath of fresh air. Yeah, I really enjoy them. I plan to be in Boston, so maybe I'll see you there. I don't know if we've met before. I guess if I went to Miami and I was also in Anaheim, so we probably at least saw each other, but I don't remember meeting anyone by the name of Hunter. Oh, you say your name actually is Hunter. You just don't put your last name on here. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember meeting a Hunter at OCON, so um, we should meet. So Yeah, if you see me or if I see you at the conference in Boston, let's introduce ourselves in person. But good to see you here at least. Hunter says um, OCON is way better than the smaller ones. It's so expensive though. So there are smaller conferences. So usually at OCON there are several hundred, maybe around 500 people. But as I mentioned, sometimes they have conferences at different times of the year, like in the spring or the fall. And I think they're sometimes in Europe. I know they were in, let's see, they were in Prague at one conference. Maybe I think Amsterdam, they had another one, and some other cities. Uh, oh, they went to Athens once, or somewhere in Greece. Um, and they also had conferences in Atlanta for at least a few years in a row, I think. So, um, and I think they're mainly geared towards people who are new to objectivism, maybe students. I think students make up the largest segment of the attendees at these non-summer conferences that are usually just, I think, 2 or 3 days, maybe around a weekend. So I think those are mainly geared towards students, like college students, undergraduates who are new to the Ayn Rand. Um, Whereas the OCON in the summer is usually a bit longer, maybe 5 or 6 days. And there are definitely many students there, and they offer scholarships. Actually, the Ayn Rand Institute is offering scholarships. Today might be the deadline, I think, to apply for one, I think, because I saw just a day or two ago that some post on social media saying that there were only 2 days left. So to apply for a student scholarship at OCON, so there might still be time to get a scholarship if you're interested in going to OCON. But there are also many non-students at OCON, so many adults, people in their 60s, 70s, maybe there's some 80s there. I'm not sure, but also, you got people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, some teens in their teens. Some people bring their children. You get families who sometimes go to OCON, but it's a much, I guess, broader range of people who go to the OCON conference in the summers, and it's less geared just to people who are new to the philosophy. The sorts of talks that are given there, um, but I think it's a good opportunity to meet people who share your values or share your interests. People who are interested in Ayn Rand. It's a good networking opportunity, I think. I found I was able to meet a lot of people and get new subscribers actually to my YouTube channel. That was one of the best things about it for me. Maybe the best thing about it is building an audience for this channel. Last year was great in Anaheim because Euron Brook, he hosted his show from live from OCON. So usually he's doing his show from his condominium in Puerto Rico. I guess it's a condominium. But during OCON, he does his show at OCON in one of the hotel rooms. At least typically he does. And there's a live audience there in the room with him. And I attended his live show from OCON last summer. And he took questions from the live audience. And I got in the line of questioners. And when he came to me, I asked him if it was okay with him if I mentioned my YouTube channel, and he said yes. So I just said a little to introduce who I was. I said a I had a YouTube channel, and I'm a PhD in philosophy, and I also promote Ayn Rand, and I'm looking to grow the channel. And I encouraged people to check my channel out and subscribe. I got a lot of subscribers, like more than I ever got. Um, like I was mentioning earlier in this show, that I was yesterday was a good day for me because I got 2 subscribers, which is more than I usually get on a day. But on that day, I think I got 26 subscribers just from speaking on going on his show and mentioning that I had a channel. And I asked him a question as well after I plugged my channel. I asked him about his blocking policy on his YouTube channel, like blocking people in chat if they're rude or obnoxious. I was curious what his policy was to that. But before I asked that question, I just asked, I did a little plug, a little advertisement for my own YouTube channel. And I got a great response from that. And it continued going on for the like several days, maybe around a week. I was still getting a large stream of subscribers. So I think in that one week after being on his show, which by the way is on his channel, if you search for OCON Live or something on his channel, you can find that show that I was in, and you can see when I asked the question. I'm actually on video asking the question. But for like a week after that, I did that. I continued to get more subscribers. I think I got like 75 subscribers, I think, in one week, which is, I think, by far the most subscribers I ever got in that stretch of time. So that was great. And hopefully I can find a way to replicate that sort of phenomenon in the future. Um, I have some ideas, at least how to partially replicate that. Maybe I'll say some more about that later. But anyways, how did I get on to that? Oh, we were talking about OCON and oh, I think I was just saying if anyone subscribes, that would be great, or likes my stream now. I definitely appreciate that. But let me look back here at some of these chats. So got some more from Hunter. I see. Um, he says, um, okay, I'm going to get to Dennis after this because I want to get to spread the time around a bit. But Hunter says, do you think there's hope of an individualist pushback against growing the Christian nationalist movements? Unfortunately, I've heard at least one guy here in rural Alabama saying he regrets voting Trump. Um, and then let me just read these from Hunter, and then I think maybe I'll come back to this and say more, but I just want to read it for now. And so then Hunter says, I've noticed many objectivists default to using a quote or argument by Ayn Rand to defend their viewpoints. They don't really put it into their own words. It makes us look dogmatic, in my opinion. Okay. So let me now go to Dennis and come back to Hunter just so I give some time to different people here. And Dennis says, I'm the same. Yeah. Okay. So you are the Dennis that I interacted with recently on Facebook. Okay. Well, welcome. Nice to have you here. And you say, I appreciate the stuff you do insofar as I know about it. Were you an objectivist also during your philosophy PhD? And either way, what's your experience with objectivism and academia? All right, let me just take a sip of water here. I was an objectivist during my PhD in philosophy, and um, also during my master's, and also during my bachelor's. So when I first read Ayn Rand, it was right before I started in university. So right that summer after I graduated high school, which was the summer of 1997, that's when I first read Ayn Rand. So right before I went to college. And so all through college, I was an objectivist. And well, actually, I think I did wait about a year to call myself an objectivist. I was definitely a fan from the very beginning, but I guess out of cautiousness, I thought maybe I shouldn't immediately take on the label of objectivist because it's more significant than just saying you're a fan of Ayn Rand. Objectivism, it implies some understanding of the philosophy. And if you've just read like one article or one book, that's at least if it's like the nonfiction. I started with the nonfiction, which was Philosophy Who Needs It. And I've said more about this in previous live streams, the details of exactly what I read when I was first getting into objectivism. But I started with a nonfiction, but and I loved Philosophy Who Needs It. I think it was an amazing book, and it made me want to read the rest of her nonfiction. So that's what I did. But just after reading that one big book, I didn't think that was enough for me to say I understand or am familiar with enough of the philosophy to be able to say I agree with it and call myself an objectivist. So I think I waited about a year until I felt it was appropriate to start using that label. Um, but ever since then, I think it's a good label for me. Um, so certainly an Ayn Rand fan. I've always been since I ever read Ayn Rand. People have someone actually told me he didn't think I was an objectivist. I'm not sure I want to go into that story now, or ever, but I'm at least close, I think. Uh, but this is someone whose opinion I respect. But I didn't. I guess we didn't spend a lot of time talking about it. So um, I'm not sure if I would agree with that assessment, but I think I'm at least in the ballpark of being an objectivist. I have there is one video on my channel which is titled, "Do you have any disagreements with objectivism?" And I talk some in there about questions I have. I'm not sure if I agree or if I agree with Ayn Rand's view. It has to do with hedonism. I've talked about this in previous live streams, so I won't go into the details of it now, but I think that might be part of the reason that this person thought he wouldn't call me an objectivist. Um, but anyways, I think I'm at least close. I mean, you can make your own assessment. If you think I say something that's not aligned with objectivism, feel free to tell me. I mean, what's most important is the truth. Like, are you trying to find the truth? Um, Now, you don't want to misrepresent who you are. So, if you are aware of some aspect of the philosophy that you disagree with, at least if it's an important aspect of the philosophy, um, then I think it would be right not to call yourself an objectivist because you don't want to misrepresent yourself or Ayn Rand's position. But I'm not aware right now. I'm certainly not. I'm not certain that I have any serious disagreement with her. There is some. Here's a minor thing which I mentioned in that video that I said I had on my channel, which is titled, "Do you have any disagreements with objectivism?" One point I mentioned in there is the dictionary definition of the term selfishness. So Ayn Rand makes a statement in the introduction to The Virtue of Selfishness about what the dictionary definition of selfishness is. She says it's concern with your own interests. But if you actually look in a dictionary, that's usually not what you find. So I think she might have made a mistake on that. But does that mean you don't agree with objectivism if you think she made a mistake about the dictionary definition of selfishness? It's not clear to me that something like that is significant enough to warrant saying I'm not an objectivist. It's a label she chose to use, and she makes a certain claim about the definition of that label in the dictionaries, but I don't really see that as it's not obvious there's there's a deep philosophic issue. I mean, it could just be an issue of like if you agree with what she advocates in terms of ethics, that you should live for yourself, you should be an egoist, you should pursue your own interests and not sacrifice yourself to others. Well, that's the most important thing, right? That's the substance of the issue. Now, what label do you give that? Do you call that selfishness? Do you call that self-interest? Do you call that egoism? Exactly what label you put on that is a separate issue. And I think there is some importance. I mean, labels do matter. They are how we communicate with each other. So it's not that labels are irrelevant, but I think they're not as important as if you can um, assess the ideas that those labels are meant to refer to, and do you disagree or disagree with those? Now, if we're talking about the fundamental ideas that she's referring to in ethics, I agree. I think she's right. You should live for yourself. Um, so that doesn't seem to me now at least to be a significant enough disagreements that I would say I'm not an objectivist. And I'm not aware of anything else where I would definitely say I have a disagreement with her. So it seems reasonable to me that objectivist is an appropriate label for me. But hey, if you want to argue with me about that, feel free. The most important thing, though, as I mentioned, is what is the truth? And are you pursuing that? And I'm certainly trying to do that. But of course, you got to make your own assessment, both for yourself and for anybody else, as to whether they fit a certain label, whether they are pursuing the truth. Okay. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, so you asked Dennis, what's your experience with objectivism in academia? Okay, so here's another issue which I addressed some in previous live streams, but that's okay because I know people are coming to my stream at different times. Not everyone, I don't expect that everyone has watched every single stream I've ever done. My point is always to reach new audiences. So let me say at least a little bit about that now. Objectivism in academia. So my experience was that Ayn Rand was often treated dismissively. She she usually didn't come up at all in my classes. Um, I don't know if she ever came up uh, unless like I or somebody else raised her. Like if we raised our hand and asked a question and mentioned Ayn Rand, maybe it would come up that way. But I don't recall Ayn Rand ever coming up just um, from the professor, him or herself. So she usually doesn't come up at all. But if she ever did come up, I think she was usually treated, or at least often treated dismissively. They wouldn't really take her seriously. Um, that was my experience in as an undergraduate. Um, as a graduate student, I guess it was kind of unusual in that I had advisors. So once you get to graduate school, you have an advisor who works closely with you, which wasn't the case as an undergrad. I didn't really interact closely for an extended period of time with any of my professors. I guess if you're doing an honors program as an undergraduate, then you might have that sort of relationship. But I didn't do a special honors program when I was an undergraduate. Um, but once I got to graduate school, I did work closely with professors, and my master's advisor knew a lot about Ayn Rand, which is very unusual. Um, so, and I had many discussions with him, and uh, cordial. He was not dismissive. I think he was actually sympathetic to Rand's. Um, I think maybe I don't know if he previously considered himself an objectivist. Maybe he was an ex or former objectivist. But by the time I was working with him, He wasn't an objectivist at that point, but he was still very knowledgeable about the philosophy, um, and he wasn't dismissive at all. And we had many good conversations. But that was very unusual. I think most people, their graduate advisor in philosophy probably knows very little or nothing about Ayn Rand's philosophy. Um, and I guess that was more the case for me once I got to my doctoral program. So the advisor I was just talking about, he was in for my master's degree, but uh, I went to a different school for my PhD degree, and then my advisor during my PhD degree, he was more the normal sort of professor who knew little or nothing about Ayn Rand. However, he was not dismissive. He was very open to talking about Ayn Rand, and he and I had many conversations about her philosophy. Often we would debate some issue, and they were cordial debates, um, not hostile, um, but they were debates. And I really enjoyed them. They were a lot of fun. We would have hours long conversations sometimes, and many of them. I think that was my favorite part of graduate school. Actually, I would say those conversations with him. Um, but again, I think this was pretty unusual. I think most people who are objectivists in graduate school probably don't have an advisor like that who they're having dozens of multi-hour conversations about objectivism, or at least discussing some other topic, maybe and I'm bringing explicitly into the conversation objectivist ideas, and I'm citing Ayn Rand. A lot of objectivists, I think, they stay in the closet in academia. They're not open about their objectivism for good reasons, because I think maybe you will be penalized in some way, maybe not treated fairly, or maybe you'll be treated in an unfriendly way, or maybe at the very least, people will harbor private feelings towards you, even if they're not outwardly expressing them. Maybe they'll be suspicious of you, and maybe think this guy's kind of weird. Um, so, but I wasn't like totally open in the sense that like I came in and just announced on day one, I am an Ayn Rand fan. I wore a short shirt that says A is A on it or something. But if I was writing a paper for a seminar, and the ideas that I was drawing on to write my paper, depending on heavily on what I learned from Ayn Rand, that I might cite Ayn Rand in the paper. So I didn't want to plagiarize her ideas, but she had heavily influenced my thinking. So like on so many topics. So it was the case for at least a few of my papers that I thought it made sense to mention Ayn Rand in the paper. So that's the sense in which I was open about my interest or knowledge of objectivism. It came up in some papers. I guess that might have been the first way in which other people in the department knew that I had some interest in Ayn Rand. But over time, over the years, I became more open about it. I would have discussions outside of seminars with people about it. Um, but each person just has to decide for themselves what makes sense in their context, how open to be about it, given your goals, what you're trying to achieve. Um, so I didn't go into academia in the end. I mean, for maybe the first half of my time in grad school, I was thinking I would eventually pursue a career as a professor, but I eventually decided I wanted to try something different. And I guess maybe at that point, it wasn't as risky to be open about my interest in Rand, because I would need to have um, I wouldn't be going into letters of recommendation are one thing you need if you're going to go on the, uh, I guess, job market, or um, you want to be promoted to tenure if you already do get a job. So your reputation with your colleagues is important for advancing if you're in academia. So that's something to keep in mind if you are going to be open about your interest in Rand. Like, how will that affect your relation to your colleagues who you're going to have to be working with and serving on committees with, and maybe writing letters of recommendation for, and vice versa. Um, but all that wasn't really an issue for me, since I decided at a certain point I wasn't going to be pursuing an academic career. I wanted to engage with a more public audience, like I'm doing now on YouTube. Um, so I might have approached things differently if I had thought all the way through grad school that I wanted to eventually be a professor. Um, that might have necessitated a different sort of strategy. But in any case, um, for me, uh, I'm glad I was open. I really enjoyed talking about Ayn Rand's especially with my advisor. As I mentioned, I think that was my favorite part of graduate school. And if I were in the closet the whole time about it, then I wouldn't have had that awesome experience. So there's a bit about objectivism and active academia as it relates to me. All right. It is now we've been going for about an hour here. And see, we got several people watching. So thanks for coming by. Thanks for any likes and subscriptions. If anyone wants to call in and have a chat, feel free to do so. There is a link which I pinned at the top of the YouTube chat. So all you need to do is click on that link, and that'll put you in the Zoom waiting room. And it'd be helpful if you just let me know in the YouTube chat that you did that. Just say, I want to call in, or I did call in on Zoom. Because I'm usually looking at the YouTube chat, not Zoom. So I'll see that first. And there's also a phone number. So if you want to call in by phone, let me give you the number again. The number to call is 669-444-9171. And then you'll be prompted to enter a meeting ID after you dial that number. And the meeting ID is 847-742-01857 #. And then you'll have to press pound a second time, and then that'll get you into the waiting room. All right. So we had a couple calls last time. We don't always have a call. But it's nice to get calls. So if anyone wants to call in, I welcome you. And I can carry the conversation. It can just be a get to know you chat. You don't have to feel like you have some agenda you want to get through. I can just ask you questions, kind of like I do now. Like if I ask you about your username, like what's the story behind it? I can just get to know you some if you like. And you can be anonymous if you want. You don't have to turn your video on, and you don't have to use your own name. So feel free to call in. All right, but let me see what else I got here in the chat now. Oh, Dennis says, thank you. I appreciate your extensive answer. You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so the only other comments I think were in here that I was going to get to were from Hunter. So let me go back to Hunter after I take a sip of water. And let me do a quick look at my analytics. See how many people have come by the stream. I put out ads on, or announcements on Facebook and X. Sometimes that Helps to get people who drop by. I put out a new video on my channel, not a live stream video, but a pre-recorded video. I had a conversation with someone by the name of Jack Allwile or Allwheel, which just went on my channel yesterday. So it was an interview on what capitalism is. Just about 50 minutes long or so. And it's also on his channel. I guess he has an editor who created a little intro, which I liked. Usually my videos don't usually have like a trailer at the beginning, which takes a little clip and teases the episode. But his editor did that, and he told me it was okay if I use the same video on my channel. So you can see that little trailer clip. Um, I like the music in the background. That's gives it some little dramatic flavor. Um, all right. So okay. So I was going to get back to the Hunter. Um, Hunter says, do you think there's hope of an individualist pushback against growing the Christian nationalist movement? I've fortunately heard at least one guy here in rural Alabama. Oh, that's where you are? Okay. Saying he regrets voting Trump. Hmm. Let's see. Do I have any thoughts on that? I don't follow the news very closely. Certainly not the way Ron Brook does. So he would probably have more to say about this than I do. I spend a lot of time reading history and a little bit on current events, but um, maybe not as much as I do on history. But let me see if I can think of anything to say about this. Is there any hope of an individualist pushback against growing the Christian nationalist movement? Well, I guess there's hope. What we're doing right now here on this channel is part of the pushback, and everyone who's promoting Ayn Rand's ideas is part of the pushback against growing Christian nationalism. So maybe you're asking, is there a hope of success? I do think there is. And it's partly an issue of free will, the choices we make. How much time, for instance, do we choose to put into advancing the cause of individualism, either ourselves by, for instance, having discussions with people online, or by helping others by sending them money, like making financial contributions to the Ayn Rand Institute or to my Patreon or PayPal. So it's up to us, at least in part, as to how much pushback there is and whether we will succeed. And you say you've heard at least one guy in rural Alabama saying he regrets voting for Trump. I've also heard people say they regret voting for Trump. Um, so I guess that's a good sign, assuming he regrets it for the right reasons. Like that Trump is too authoritarian or doesn't care about the truth or doesn't care about the rule of law. Um, January 6th comes to mind, which is something I've been reading about recently, as you know, if you've heard my recent live streams. So, yeah, I know some people have changed their minds. Let's see. Rural Alabama. That's a place I've never been. I don't even know if I've driven through Alabama. I think I've been to Florida because I used to live on the East Coast and we had relative in Virginia. That's where I'm from originally. I grew up in Virginia and we had relatives down in Florida and we would drive down there usually every summer, I think, to visit. That might have been the closest I ever was to Alabama, aside from like driving across the country once when I moved out to California. But I don't think I went through Alabama on that trip. I was north of that. I took the 40, I-40, Interstate 40 across the country most of the way, and I think that was north of Alabama. Let's see, went through Tennessee. I'm not sure after that what I went through. Anyways, you might be the first person from Alabama who I have on my chat here. Uh, okay, what else do we have? I might have to take a little snack break here because I'm feeling hungry. Uh, oh, Hunter says I will definitely call in one day. I got to get back to work soon, but seems fun. Okay, uh, sounds good. Well, thanks for coming by, Hunter. I appreciate getting to meet you here in the chat, at least. Let me see if any. Okay, looks like the waiting room is still empty. So if anyone wants to call in, you don't have anyone ahead of you. All right. I think I'm going to take a few minutes break here. I'm not going to end the stream. I'm just going to turn off my camera and my mic for a few minutes and get a quick snack, and then I'll be back and engage some more. I'll probably go for, I don't know how long today. I usually go for an hour and a half or 2 hours, somewhere in there. And we've been going for close to hour and a half. So depending on the engagement I get, I'll be here longer or shorter. So it depends on you all, actually. Um, so if you want to extend the stream longer, engage more in the chat, and then I'll have more to reply to. But I'm going to take just a few minutes, maybe 3, 4-ish minutes to get a snack, and then I'll be back. All right. See you soon. All right, I am back. Don't see any new chats. I think the only chat I didn't address yet was this last one from Hunter, or second to last one. I read it before, but I didn't really say anything about it. Um, let me, maybe I can say something on it. He said, I've noticed many objectivists default to using a quote or argument by Ayn Rand to defend their viewpoints. They don't really put it into their own words. It makes us look dogmatic, in my opinion, he says. That can happen sometimes. I guess if you're, especially if you're new to the philosophy and you're young, you haven't really processed the philosophy yourself. So at that stage, I think it can make sense to quote Ayn Rand more. I remember I used to do that a lot with the Ayn Rand lexicon. So when that first summer, right after high school, when I first started reading Ayn Rand's, I bought the Ayn Rand lexicon, which is a mini encyclopedia of objectivism. I think that's how it's called, maybe on the cover of the book or something. But it's a collection of passages from Ayn Rand's works on various topics. So if you want to know what does Ayn Rand say about abortion, you can go to the A section and look up abortion, or what does she say about selfishness? Go to the S and look up selfishness. So on every topic you could think of, or on many topics, um, you could you could get a lot of material on what Ayn Rand's view of it was. So especially when you're new to Ayn Rand and you're just getting oriented, um, I think that's a very helpful resource because all these subjects come up if you're just having discussions with people and you might not have thought of them before. So you can say, oh, well, what did Ayn Rand have to say about this? I mean, as long as you use that appropriately, I think it's fine. Like if you don't think, well, just because she said it, uh, that it's true just because she said it, right? That's incorrect. But you can use it at least as a lead, as to maybe something worth thinking about because you have a lot of respect for her based on what you have read and understood. So I think it's reasonable to want to know what does she say about some topic. And the Ayn Rand lexicon, which is now free online, by the way, uh, that's another nice thing that's happened in recent years. Well, it's been on there for decades now, but um, recent, more recent than when I got into objectivism originally. So you can go to the Ayn Rand Institute campus website and find it there. And also, I think there's a separate website for it. But if you just Google Ayn Rand lexicon, it should be easy to find. I think it's a great resource, but but use it wisely. And as Hunter is saying, just because Ayn Rand says something, that doesn't mean it's true. However, I do think it's definitely worth considering at least what she says. I think often it is true, and it's a great place to start. I think on just because the way she frames many topics, her way of coming at an issue, I think is very good and distinctive. And so I think for that reason, it's often a good idea to see what she has to say about some issue. Okay, so maybe I can say a little about what I've been reading recently. I often do a reading update. That is an update on what I've been reading recently because I spend a lot of time reading when I'm not doing these streams. And since we don't have any new chat messages or callers at the moment, I can spend a little time saying what I've been reading. So just today, I was reading about Israel and the actually the period before the state of Israel existed, the few decades prior. So the prior to the state of Israel, which was founded in 1948, there was the British mandate in Palestine, it was called, or Mandatory Palestine. So Britain controlled the area of Israel uh, after World War One. I think from 1920 to 1948 is the period of the British mandate in Palestine. And I was reading about what led up to that. So there was the Zionist movement, the which was a movement starting in the late 19th century for there to be a state for the Jewish people because there was persecution that the Jews faced in Europe. I think that was the main, at least one of the main motivations for creating a state for the Jews is so they would have somewhere to go to escape the persecution they were facing, and especially in Russia. I think that was one of the main areas where they faced pogroms. Um, but there was a movement called the Zionist movements, which the goal of which was to create the state. And there were proposals for different places it might be. There was a proposal for it to be in East Africa, Uganda at one time, but that didn't come to fruition. At least a temporary home for them. I guess there was it was British East Africa at the time. I think near Kenya. So maybe because the British were there and there were some sympathies among the Brits to the idea of there being a Jewish home for or a home for the Jews. Maybe that's why they chose that area as a possible location, but it did not end up being the place they chose. Um, but there was this Zionist movement, and there was a series of congresses, many many congresses. I think often in Switzerland, where they would meet to discuss issues. Um, I think originally they were every year, I think starting in maybe 1897, but eventually they were every other year, and there was an interruption during the two world wars. Um, During the First World War, there was the Balfour Declaration, which I think was the first time when this Zionist movement had a major country, the UK, supporting its goal to have a state for the Jews to go to. So I read some about the Balfour Declaration, named after Arthur Balfour, who I guess he was the Foreign Secretary of Britain at the time, something like that. But then there were other agreements very close to that. There's the Sykes-Picot agreements the year before, between the French and the British about how they would. It was a secret agreement originally, a secret agreement between the British and French about how they would carve up the Ottoman Empire after World War One, assuming that the Ottoman Empire was defeated. So Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of Germany, who France and Britain were fighting. So if France and did I say France and Germany? I meant to say France and Britain were fighting against Germany and the Ottoman Empire. So if France and Britain won, then they had this agreement, the Sykes-Picot agreement, as to how they would carve up the Ottoman Empire. And I was also reading about that that agreement, and there were some other things that came up in that same time period. I was reading about um, this correspondence between, I guess, the British and uh, an Arab leader. I forget the name of the correspondence. Maybe I can find it if I go to the McMahon-Hussein correspondence. That's what it was. So there was, I guess the Hussein was the leader of an Arab group who wanted to, I guess Britain wanted to ally itself with this Arab group against the Ottoman Empire in World War One. So I think the idea was that this Arab group would rebel against the Ottoman Empire. Um, they would rebel and side with Britain. And in exchange for that, the Brits would recognize a certain territory in the region that would be Arab territory. But I think maybe later that agreement in the correspondence between Britain and Hussein, between McMahon and Hussein, was overridden or uh, maybe misinterpreted. They had different ideas of exactly what lands would be under the jurisdiction of the Arab states. Um, so I think there were differences of an interpretation, which I think led to tensions and problems later. I haven't read too much into it, but something like that was going on. But anyways, that's the most recent things I was reading about. Okay. Well, it looks like we have reached the 1.5 hour mark, and I don't see any new chatters or callers. So maybe this is a good time to end the stream. You can always comment on it later afterwards. Feel free to leave a comments. And if you like the stream, again, thanks for giving it a like, and thanks for any subscriptions. All right, I guess there's more I could tell you about my reading. I guess I'll just say very quickly before I end the stream, unless anyone pipes up here in chat. Maybe I'll just quickly say about the other things I was reading, and then I'll end. So I've also read some about more about January 6th, got into more of the details of it. I was reading about some of the hearings that the January, or I actually watched some of the hearings that occurred that were conducted by the January 6th committee. And then I was also reading about the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate, just basically how they function. And there was a Senate trial of Trump being impeached. So he was impeached for the second time in January of 2021, just a few days after the January 6th attack. And he was impeached by the House, and then there was a trial in the Senate to convict or acquit him. So you have to go through both of those steps to remove him from office. If just impeaching him in the House of Representatives is not enough to actually remove him from office, the Senate there has to be a trial in the Senate, and then he has to be convicted in the Senate trial. But he wasn't. Weren't enough votes. They were 10 votes short of getting the 2/3 majority needed to convict Trump. So he actually was not convicted. But I think maybe it was just knowing about his impeachment in the House and then the conviction or the trial of his impeachment in the Senate that made me interested to learn more about the House and the Senate. So I was reading some about how they function. Okay. I think that's probably good enough for an update on what I've been learning about behind the scenes. So I'm going to end the stream. Thanks again for everyone coming by, and I will plan to do a new stream on Saturday, roughly the same time. So hope to see some people then. All right. Bye-bye.